Very special speaker with us today. You guys know this gentleman, even though you don't know you know this gentleman. This gentleman's name is on the building. He's part of the reason why we have this facility, why we're here. This gentleman has got a really interesting story to tell. This is John Hoich.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. It's exciting to be here, and it's exciting to see some new faces that are. When people ask me what it's about, what do they do here, and what do what are they? And it's so great that I can always correct them immediately, and I can and just say that these are people like you and like me, and so everybody in here is me. Only you're all better looking and probably taller. But it's exciting to be here because you're here because you want to make your life better. Anybody agree with that? And has anybody had any addictions in here? Yeah. I thought that is
Right?
that could happen here. So and so it's at one time I was honored to be speaking here, and I found out right in the middle. It was about 2011. Right in the middle of my talk, I realized, I always professed I don't smoke. I hardly have ever drank. I've never did drugs, and then all of a sudden, right in my middle of my speech, I went, man, doing something, to hide a problem, doing something that you put off because it's bothering you, whatever it is, old, now, or future fears. Fear. Anybody heard the word fear? Has anybody ever seen it spelled out? What's it say? I never heard that one. So those are good. I'd like you to write those down for me. I don't know if I'll use that second one a lot, but the one I was taught was false evidence appearing real. That's so. There's three. We could write a book, and so when I was going through some things that I'll lead up to, but when every time you think everything's going great, sometimes that other word comes to my mind, and everything can just crash and burn. And then it's, what do we want to do with it? How do we want to respond to it? How are we willing to face it? And we all want to say that our higher power or God will get us through it. And I love my higher power is Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Some is Muslim, some's Hindu, some's atheist, some's it's whatever your higher power is. But sometimes higher power is not in front of us, can't feel it, touch it, or hold it. And so sometimes we need two different things. We need a substance of some sort. Sometimes that substance can be a person, that really loves you and appreciates you. And that's the better person, the best thing, because if they're genuine and they really care, it's good to have good people that love you and care. And that's what this staff does here for you guys, don't they? Let's give them a hand. Because that's what this is all about. And when I went through my ups and downs in life, there was times that I needed those people. Sometimes people aren't there for you, and that's a bad day. And then when 2011, when I was talking, I realized that I had an addiction no different than everybody in here. My choice of drug was workaholism. And so I never, you never want to think that workaholism can be a drug. And then I kind of looked in a mirror and I kind of looked back at my life and I looked at the story I'm about to tell you, how I got there and how it screwed up my life, how I didn't fish as often as I did or never took the time to sometimes just smell the flowers and enjoy what God made us, this world that we have. And that's the most important thing, is to enjoy what we got and not what we don't got. And I don't know if that's good English or not, but it makes sense to me. Did it make sense to you guys? And so I've just enjoyed having what I've got, but it took me a lifetime to get my stuff together and realize that what I have, thank God for what I have, not worry what I don't have. And the greatest thing that I learned through the whole recession period, I don't know if anybody in business or remembers '08 to 12, we had a bad 4 years of real estate and business and banks and housing crashed, and a lot of people, two of my best friends in the business world, not in my personal life, but in business, two of my really close business associates took their lives. Failure is not fatal, but if you take your life, it's fatal. So on my refrigerator, I have two things that every day I read it over and over. Never, never give up. And so that is something that I beg all of you to do. Never, never, never give up. And know that nothing, no failure that you have is fatal. And don't ever do what those two guys did, because you can't have a second choice on that. And so back in 1958, I was born in Council Bluffs. I came over on the Mayflower to Omaha at some point on the river. So I landed in Omaha, Nebraska, and I had my father, my mother, and married a guy named John Hoich, John George Hoich, and he inherited a bar that was built somewhere in the 20s. Michael and I, we didn't get the date that the original bar was built from the assessor's office, but there was a bar here. I don't know if anybody ever drank here when it was here. You guys are all too old. It's a joke. And so it was built in 1920s, and there was a lot of stockyards and a lot of cows and a lot of smell from around South Omaha. Was famous for cows and bars, and they got off working at taking care of the cows, butchers, packing houses, and then they'd go, drink, and sometimes got home mostly not sober. And so then it just seems like that was a way of life in South Omaha. And it was my uncle capitalized on it. He had 3 bars, and my father ended up inheriting in 1949 this bar called the First and Last Chance, and Johnny's Blue Room, he called it. And the First and Last Chance bar, and it had a cool restaurant about the size of this room maybe, and then the bar wasn't but a couple times the size of this room. So it wasn't a real big place. It wasn't the hottest place in town. When we go around town, we see a Burger King and a McDonald's on one corner, and then now you see CVS and Walgreens. And back then you'd see a bar, and a gas station, and a bar, and a gas, so every corner in South Omaha had a bar. And it was just, that was the big deal. And so my dad had it, and he had a wife and 3 kids before me, and that marriage ended in alcoholism and smoking 3 packs a day, and never coming home. And that marriage ended in divorce, and the wife took off after I was about 6 months old, staying at found to be my dad's house. And she moved to Chicago to get away from my father, because he would come home drunk and was mean. He was served, and I've wore this flag almost every day since 9/11. So God bless America, right? And so he served in World War II. So I honor him for that, 4 years, and as a Marine. But he never forgot to quit being a mean Marine. And that when he got drunk, the mean Marine seemed to come out of him. And instead of beating up somebody at work, he'd come home and beat up his kids and his wives. His first wife, his second wife, his first 3 kids, and then 6 kids in the second marriage. And he'd come home at 11 o'clock at night from this bar that he inherited from my uncle in 1949. And he inherited $500,000. And the short, fast story is that from the time I was 5 to 11 years old, that when he went bankrupt, already had lost the whole $500,000, lost the bar, and ended up getting a job at where? A bar, because that way he could steal free drinks. They all have a trick to their addictions. Have anybody ever learned that? And so it's kind of interesting how you surround yourself with the people you want to be. I always say, if you hang with the ducks, you'll quack like a duck. So if your environment that you hang with really watch what you're doing and who you hang with, so that you know that your environments you hang with is positive people and attitudes are positive. So he'd come home at 11 o'clock at night, and it was almost a ritual. And he would come home and grab me out of my bed, and I was so afraid to when that was coming that I always worried. From 5 to 11 years, me and the sisters, I was the oldest, as a boy, 4 sisters and a brother, and we would literally find places in the house to try to hide. Here we went to bed at 8, we're only 5, we're only in first grade, second grade. We're supposed to be to bed by 8, and we're little kids, but I had to grow up so fast, and I'd hide in closets up on the second level. I'd get up on boxes and then throw the boxes out. I'd hide in the gas room downstairs where the gas pipe was in the closet. I'd try to hide under the laundry table, and he'd just seem like he'd come and find me and drag me into the hall and then throw my head through drywall as he'd spit in my face with his stinky cigarettes and his stinky alcohol. And he would tell me I was a no good, rotten little bastard and would never amount to nothing. And that was the life that I grew up with. And then he'd punch me, and then I'd go to school. And back when I was in school, because I'm old, very old, okay. And so I was in the 1960s. You could go to school, and I was bruised, and I had a lot of bruises on me, and red, white, and blue. It was terrible. And the teachers knew something was going on. But that's back then when the teachers could smack you with a ruler, and you'd go home and cry, and Mr. Truel hit me with the ruler right on my back of my head, and my dad would say, "What did you do to deserve it?" Where today you look cross-eyed at a student, you get sued. It's a whole different world, that I was. So I'd get beat at school and I'd get beat at home, and it wasn't fun. It was not fun. And so there was a big miss in my life called love. I never got that a boy. I never got a pat on the back for anything I ever did. And most of the time, I never thought I did anything right. It just seemed like I was always doing everything wrong. Anybody brought up in any kind of life like that? So you all understand where we're coming from. Where you just feel like your self-esteem. I was short. And then my dad filed bankruptcy. We lived in 90th and Center area, I went to a high school. Anybody go to Westside High School in here? Really, we got 2 of you. So, when I was in Westside, it was called Hollywood High. Is it still called that? That's what they called it, because all the rich kids went there. And so that was how I was. And we were very poor. And back in the 60s and early 70s, no one was divorced. I mean, no one was divorced. In our whole school, we had, a couple, I don't know, 1,800, 2,000 kids at Westside when I got there. No one was divorced, and my mom and dad were divorced and bankrupt. And I had a food card from 9 to 10 years old, so everybody's putting quarters, paying their quarter for their lunch, and I'm given this card. And nothing's more embarrassing when the kid next to you says, what's that card? And you have to explain, because we're on welfare and food stamps and ADC at Hollywood High, and so what's your dad do? Well, he's an alcoholic that filed bankruptcy, and you try to. And what's your dad do? Well, he owns Baker's grocery stores, or he owned First National Bank. So it was very intimidating. So again, low self-esteem, right? So you go through life, and the good news is that it gave me a drive. When people say, "Well, what good came out of your life?" Man, it sounds like it sucked. It did. But the good thing is that I wrote a book called From the Ground Up. It's not just business. That's my first lawnmower you're going to hear about in a minute. But what I did was I overcame an adversity. That was my claim to fame. Some people invented Facebook or the hula hoop when I was a kid. That's what, it was a thing that would go like this, And that guy made a lot of money wiggling his ass and having that hula hoop. Or a lady or whoever did it. We should probably ask Siri who invented hula hoop. And but I was lucky, however God, and I was raised in my heart. No matter what my dad told me, no good, rotten little bastard never amount to nothing. Remember that one sentence. No good, rotten little bastard part's kind of interesting how it comes around on a 180 here. Second, that low self-esteem. Third, being around all these people that were richer and I was poor. Most of them were taller and I was shorter. And I was a gymnast and they were football players. And most of them had Trans Am and Corvettes and Camaros and Z28s, and I had a bicycle. And then my first vehicle was a 3-speed column beat up old pickup truck. But all that made me, luckily, overcoming the adversity to say, I don't want to live like this. And I was one of the lucky ones. And I thank God for every day, because so many people, when you do some sort of economic, not an economic, but a history, and if the Stevens Center did a theory from when Sharon McNeil started this beautiful program, and if we could do a matrix of everybody that's been through here, and then was able to look at their story like mine, where they came from, well, shit, it only makes sense that they were a drug addict. It only makes sense that they killed somebody. It only makes sense that they robbed a bank. It only makes sense that they were an alcoholic and smoked 3 packs a day because their dad did and their grandfather did, right? Anybody had a dad, grandfather that did any of those things? So it's interesting that they say that what do they call that? When you repeat the same lifestyle? Huh? Insanity. The cycle. Thank you. And so with the cycle, I wanted to break it. My dad was a wrestler when he was in school. I wanted to be a gymnast. He smoked, I didn't. He drank, I didn't. He was a bartender, and I never bought a bar. I bought a lot of things. I never bought a bar. He did everything that I didn't want to do. And luckily, through grace of God, I didn't. So his alcoholism got worse and worse. His marine meanness got worse and worse, and he started doing sexual things to my 2 oldest sisters. He started beating my mom regular from the time I was 5 to 11, and then from 11 to when I was 16, they got divorced. He filed bankruptcy when I was 9. He paid $15 a month child support for 6 kids. That isn't much. Our food stamps were $70 for $300, so it didn't help matters. So my mom was cutting hair as a beautician at day all day, cutting hair as a beautician at night all day. He would come at night late and break in and kick the door in and beat us up. Cops would come. They'd take him to the police department, let him out the next morning, and it was just a cycle. I mean, back then, it was terrible. It was terrible what you could get away with. Today, it's a whole different world, thank God. But at the time back then, and so then, it was hard to study in school when you woke up at 11 at night. So my grades never really were good, and that continued to be a cycle. So I wasn't the smartest student, and but I graduated from Westside High School. But before that happened, my dad got worse. His alcoholism got worse. He got broker. I was loaning him money, and at 10 years old, I started carrying a World Herald paper. I did that to 13. Then I start cleaning up construction sites of new homes that were built. And then I start working at restaurants at 14, 40 hours a week at 14 years old. And I'd give my mom our whole paycheck. But during that period, my mom went through some severe mental problems. Anybody have any family or yourselves with mental problems? Okay, so they can be very, very hard. And so my mom had 4 nervous breakdowns. And each time they were about a 4-month period where she'd go in for 4 months and then we'd come back home. Where did we go? We became wards of the state. Anybody was ever a ward of the state? So that the state was my mom and dad since I was 9 years old when we went on welfare. I was in 6 foster families. The first two were single men who abused me sexually at 11 years old and 12 years old. One of them committed suicide when we went to court on. 5 of us got, you know, tampered with, let's put it, and he couldn't face the courts. My sisters were raped in 2 of their foster homes, that they were the oldest, who were the same ones raped by my father. The worst things that could ever happen, the worst things you can't even imagine, kept happening into our family. Why, God? You know, we just kept saying. But we never gave up. My mother kept trying so hard. These times she'd come home from the nervous breakdowns, saying, let's make it, let's pool together. Luckily, we kept the house because I made the payment. Mowing lawn, or not mowing lawns yet, but restaurants, and I worked at 7 restaurants and gas stations, and I was breaking all the laws because I was working 40 hours a week at 14 years old, and so that was awful young. And so I've never really knew what fun was. I never got to have a whole lot of fun, and but I was able to learn and meet, and I met a lot of people, and I made a lot of connections, and connections became my life, meeting people. And as I'm talking today, when I'm not up here, I still have another addiction. I have the gift of gab. I love to talk. I love people, and I love to help people and give advice. And so at the end of this little journey, my mom had her 4th nervous breakdown, and finally she came home from Nebraska Psychiatric Institute. They called it MPI. Richard Young, I think, was part of it. And she came home, and the caseworker came and talked to us, and the guidance counselors all said, you know, from our schools, that they met with Mom, and she was solid. She was back. And during that period, she got stronger. My dad got weaker. So he quit breaking in, quit hurting us, because he had a little problem with his liver. Can you imagine what 27 screwdrivers do to you every day? What's it called? So he went from 260 pounds and died at 70 pounds at 57 years old. And I'll finish that story in about a second. But that's the worst thing happened. My mom and I were all doing good. And she bought, her and I, when I was 14, during in and outs for her beauty hair and my World Herald and restaurants, we bought a Sears Craftsman lawnmower. This is a picture of it. I still have it. And I hated mowing the lawn. I had hay fever so bad. I hated grease, but I had to mow it because we had the biggest yard, with the littlest house you've ever seen. It was about a half-acre yard. That's a lot of grass to mow with a little lawnmower. But I kept it mowed, and even when I was in my foster homes, I'd come over and mow it and keep trying to take care of the house. And so one morning, my mom got up at 7 in the morning. I'm a junior at Westside High School. I'm 16 years old. And she said, "What did you do last night after you got done washing dishes at Mr. Up Restaurant?" And I also worked at the House of Pies. We had 57 varieties of pies. Both of those businesses are gone now. And I said, well, after I got off at 6, I went to Alateen, Kids of Alcoholic Parents. And I was in that for 9 years, and it was the greatest thing I ever learned. And she said, "Did you have fun?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "That's nice." And she took a sip of her coffee, put it down, and I heard this, just this, and her head went over to fall asleep. And it was 7 in the morning. We're all trying to get ready for school. My sisters are all, my aunt stayed, her sister was staying with us for a few days from Esterville, Iowa, up by Lake Okoboji, helping her mend clothes and helping us kind of get caught up at the house because everything was coming together. And she was 39 years old. She was this tiny little thing, about 115 pounds, about like me. And so all of a sudden when that happened, she's drinking her coffee, sat it down, that little puff came out of her breath, and all of a sudden we all go to school. My aunt kicks us out of the door, says, "Your mom's asleep and she's tired." And so we all get to school. But I knew something seemed weird as I said, "Goodbye, Mom." and she just kept sleeping. Well, I wasn't sure. All of a sudden, over the speaker, about 45 minutes into school, I called up to the principal's office, which was not abnormal, and because I talk in class, and gift of gab got me in trouble sometimes. So I did have an office next to the principal sometimes during school. And so I go in there, and he said, "John, you need to get home. Your mom's not well." He didn't say anything. I go home on my motorcycle. I had a Suzuki 125 going about 70 miles an hour because I just felt something was wrong. I get to the house, and I jumped off my motorcycle. I go in the house, and this lady looks at me and says, "Your mother has died." So here we are, 39 years old. I'm oldest of 6 kids. I have a little brother with a bad heart. He was born, his name's Michael, and he was born with a bad heart, 3 holes in it, upside down in reverse. And he had to have a surgery that year at 6 years old. I'm 16. He was 10 years difference. Mom's doing better than she ever was. We finally figured, we were praying that the past was gone. My dad was sick, and he was in the VA hospital, broke and dying. Things were starting to come together, and then they became the biggest disaster ever. Now I have a dad dying of cirrhosis of the liver, a mother that's dead. Everything's gone wrong in our lives because of the bar that was here. And now what do you do? And so do you give up? I didn't, but it was tough. And problems are like butts. We all got one. We all have had problems. And mine was just seemed like it never stopped being a problem. All I ever wanted was just a good week, a good month, a good year of something going right in our life. And it just constantly seemed like something was always going wrong. So what happened is we're wards of the state. My dad's dead, my mom's dead, and so now what's left is to go back to foster families again. So we're all 6, put in foster families. And during that period, prior to it, my little sister, my one that's second youngest to me, Susan, she was put in one in York, Nebraska. Has anybody heard of Epworth Village in York? Huh? She was there for only a week and got raped by a 17-year-old, and she was 12. We're Catholic, and my mom made her have the baby. She got pregnant. So at 12 years old, that poor little girl, raped by her father, raped and beat, and then raped at 12 years old, then has a baby by 13. I mean, my little sister Susan has seen everything. When she was 2 years old, we were at a babysitter's, and a boy 7 shot out her eye with a BB gun. She looked down the barrel and he pulled it. And he was 7, I was 4, and she was 2. Nothing has gone right for that girl. Today she's 57. I support her almost completely. She's never been able to ever come out of her depression. She just exists. She's almost like a vegetable. And my other sister Kathy, that was beat and everything all the time, she's now running a $1.8 million program called Arapahoe House in Denver, a very similar program as we have here. Drug, alcohol, mental illness, but it's also an emphasis in adolescent rape unit. So she's doing what she understands and lived.
That's a very good program.
It's beautiful. And praise God for programs, right? Let's give this program another hand. And so I took the lawnmower. I didn't know what else to do. I'm 16. Dad's dead. My mom's now dead. I'm the oldest of 6. I wasn't very smart in school. And so I took the lawnmower in my foster family and I knocked on the door next door and said, "Can I mow your yard?" And they let me. And then I did it to the other door and to another door. And through my junior year at Westside High School, I just kind of tried to mow yards in the neighborhood because I didn't have, at that time, just a bicycle and that motorcycle. I had that motorcycle, and then that was it, but that couldn't pull the lawnmower around very good. And then the next year, my senior year, I became president of the student government. I really loved everybody. I loved all the cliques. Do you remember having cliques in high school? Or you had the smart kids and the dumb kids and the druggies and the alcoholics and the and the bookworms and the, you know, and all these different cliques. And for some reason, I clicked with everybody. I looked at everybody as a person and not a clique. And that's how I look at everybody today and in here. And so the lawnmower was all I knew, and so I kept knocking on doors, and I went and got a loan for $575 and bought a pickup truck, and the banker said, "How are you going to pay for it?" I don't know, but I will. And it took me 2 years, and I paid off an old pickup, and at 18 years old, my foster dad, I was in a foster home. I graduated from West Side, barely, but I graduated. And he kicked me out of the house the day I graduated and said, "Get the hell out," because they got paid to take care of us. And after you graduate from high school, you don't get paid anymore. So learned who my friends were, in a sense. You know, it was sad. So I went and found a place to live and start mowing yards, and went to UNO. And fast story, I kept mowing yards, bought a pickup, started mowing more yards, went to UNO, tried to cut grass, make money to help my 4 sisters and my brother that was all in foster homes. And I bought my first house, 1,500 down at 18, on a land contract at 23rd and B Street in South Omaha. And then as each sister, and I was there for about 3 years, and each sister that graduated, I paid for their graduation, I paid for their dress, I paid for a car, bought each of them a car. And at 21, I finished 2 years of college, and I got an associate in real estate business and land use economics, barely, because I got a letter from the dean. Has anybody ever got a letter from the dean? Mine said you had to keep a 2.0 grade point average, and I was at 1.9, and if I didn't get it up to 2, I couldn't go to my junior year. And I went, I think I better go mow lawns. So I didn't finish, so I'm not a very smart guy, you know, and I just kept mowing yards. Mowed through my 20s. My sisters got them all graduated. My brother moved in with me. I built a duplex at 21 years old, lived in half, rented out the other one by Millard South High School, by the Millard Water Tower in Walnut Grove. Lived there 15 years, raised them all, got them all a car. At 30 years, and when I was at my mom's casket, when she died, I looked at her and said, "I'll take care of my sisters and my brother. I'm going to be a millionaire at 30, Mom." I had greater chance to win the lottery, you know, or getting hit by lightning. But at 30 years old, I made my first million mowing lawns. And at that time, I wanted to give back. And so the very school, Westside High School, I bought a house at 90th and Pacific, and to this day, I put 30 kids through college, giving them who write a 300-word essay why they had a life of hell like I did, or adversity, what they did to overcome it. So I could give them a hand up and not a hand out. And so I've done it 30 kids now, and fun. Thank you. Boys and girls, and they were all smarter than me. And inside at 90th and Pacific, it's called the John L. Hoich Westside Alumni House. And inside there tells what happened to each of these kids and what their lives became. And I'm going to perpetually do it after my death and continue. It's fun. Then at 31, my little brother's 21. He's a junior at Northwest Missouri, in Maryville, Missouri, Northwest Missouri State. And he called me, came home, got a girlfriend, and I gave him money to buy a jacket because of his bad heart. He couldn't play athletes. And anyway, he had a surgery at 6, one at 18, and at 21, he told me he's really doing good and he wanted to be a lawyer. And I loaned him money he made me sign a note that he would pay me back from all the money I gave him for college. And on October 17th of 1989, he graduated in 86. He died of a heart attack. So now I've lost my dad. I've lost Mom, my dad, and now my only brother. And he was 6'1" and much better looking. He was such a great young man. His name was Michael. And so I miss him every day of my life. So I've had so much terrible things that kept happening. But I remember where I came from. And I remembered that never to give up and to never try to fear, false evidence appearing real. So all my life I fought, that fear and trying to understand. And then I kept mowing lawns, and I started buying real estate, and I started making more money, and things got better. And I got on about 30 boards giving back. My whole life I love giving back. Store what you must and share what you can, no matter how much it is. Everything doesn't matter. It's just all in whatever you got, help somebody out. Don't loan anybody money. Say this poem is, once I had a friend and I had some money. I loaned my money to my friend. Now I don't have my friend or my money. So don't loan money to a friend, because then you're going to have that poem happen to you, right? If you can help somebody, give them $5 and forget it. Otherwise, don't, because you don't want animosity. Try to avoid problems. The more you can avoid problems that you get your own selves into, the better off, right? And all those little things that you do in life really help by avoiding. And that's drug, alcohols, and addictions, and work. Found out. So I worked and I worked and I worked so hard that I got married at 30. I met a gal at 35. I married her at 38. Had twin boys. There's 5'11". I'm 5'5". I don't know what happened. They're 20 years old now. They're at UNO in College of Business, Real Estate, and Entrepreneurship. And their mom and I divorced, unfortunately, after 10 years, but we get along perfect. Our sons are really good, and I'm very lucky that they didn't follow their grandfather's addictions. And they're good boys, and I don't know if they're going to go. They don't want to. They said mowing lawns sucks, Dad. So they don't want to mow lawns with me, so that's not good. But they do like real estate, so that's good. And Jeremy and Justin is their names, and I am very fortunate to have them. And my sisters, I think of them and love them constantly. And everything is, we fight every day. It never ends. But what I learned through the recession in 08 to 12 was what people thought of me was none of my business. What people thought of me was none of my business. Because part of my insecurities and all that fear was worrying about what everybody thought. And I had to feel like I had to prove myself all the time. And so when I realized in here, talking to you guys and gals, that I was a workaholic and that I had an addiction, and then I realized what people thought of me was none of my business, I started to heal my own little problems. So money can't buy happiness, but overcoming your adversities and getting rid of addictions and getting solid with yourself and God and others and telling the truth and realizing it doesn't matter what anybody but one, for me, what he thinks of me is all that matters. And do my best every day to be honest with integrity and kindness to help others. And so I got on a board called the Omaha Planning Board for zoning of things that get built. And while I was on the board one day, they came in with a plan next door to rip from the homeless shelter, to rip this bar down that was owned by a black gentleman that bought it from my dad in the bankruptcy. Actually, two different ones did. And I think it was called the South 7. And prior to that, it was the Relay. And then prior to that was the First and Last Chance. And they came up to the podium and said, we'd like to propose to build a drug, alcohol, mental illness center right here. And I'm like staring at, boy, that looks familiar. And I'm up in a suit and tie, and which I don't like wearing. And I'm with 6 other people and the colleagues, and I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I just start bawling, because that was the bar. And I start bawling because of the memories, then I start bawling because of what they wanted to do, of happiness, and all the people on the board, and the mayor was out there, Hal Dowie. What's wrong? Is John okay? It just happened. And there was a guy named Dale Baumberger that was the director, out there telling the story, and he thought he offended me, probably because I'm crying. And all of a sudden, I just had to tell a short story. The short story I'm telling you, I told it to 200 people that were out in the room that day, that there was some bad memories. That was my dad's bar, and I'll talk about it later. Anyway, afterwards, when we voted 100% to knock down the bar and build what was the first last chance to build a place for every one of you to have a second chance. Isn't that cool? So as soon as the vote was over, I abstained to the next case, went out and talked to Mr. Bomberger and all the other people that were with them and said, I don't know where I'm supposed to help. I don't know what I can do, but I just want to be there. They gave me some ideas, and they blessed me with the story of putting my name up there. And it's just been a blessing. And I'm gonna enjoy the rest of my life learning what I've learned. But you people that have come in here and changed in your lives has helped me change my life better and better all the time. And I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for all that this place has done for people like us, because we all had addictions. It's helped me overcome mine. So I'm fishing more. I've moved on a lake. I'm learning to fish. I'm learning to get out of my car when I see some flowers and just take time to smell the flowers, to enjoy life for what it has to offer us, and understanding all the positives instead of the negatives, and not living in the past. You can't drive in a rearview mirror. You got to go forward. And anybody heard of Tom Osborne? You know, I love what he says at one of his speeches that he closed. And it said, I've never seen a hearse pull a U-Haul yet. You can't take it with you. You don't need to take these negative things that happen in your life with you either. So when we go to our Maker, or wherever you want it, I'm hoping to heaven for me to see my mom again, to see my brother, and to see the loved ones, and to see peace. But till that day that I go naturally, I want to enjoy and help everyone here as much as possible on earth as it is in heaven. And I'm grateful to be here. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.